I love the Daily Stoic. I got my index cards and Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, though he did lose me a little with the video of 7 ways to brush your teeth as a Stoic. Thus, imagine my shock when I saw Ryan pretending to channel the ancients while actually throwing insults safely hidden behind the Stoics' backs.
Psychedelics change everything.
They show you what's truly important in life. This isn't even a quote, which is actually quite the pattern throughout the video. Why not? A quick Google says Sam Altman or Sam Harris have said things on psychedelics. Oh, but then it wouldn't be as easy to argue, so you just made up a sentence to instead misrepresent a collective of ideas. Worse yet, pretending your analysis in any way comes from the Stoics. Marcus Aurelius did psychedelics, at least he took part in the Eleusinian mysteries, as well as rebuilt their temple as soon as it was destroyed, and it was quite likely a psychedelic ritual. Seneca even has a quote that answers one of your critiques. If they are so transformative and powerful,
why do they have to keep doing them over and over and over and over again?
Because, as Seneca says, there are holy things that are not communicated all at once. Eleusis always keeps something back to show those who come again. Maybe Eleusis wasn't psychedelic. That isn't actually important. There are other ways to stimulate the brain to produce the same effect. But they definitely were a cult with a shaman where you get revelations on a weekend surrounded by a bunch of people who pay to go on a retreat with you. So the argument you should have made when you said you'd go through some of the worst advice on the internet and see what the Stoics would tell us to do is this. Marcus Aurelius and other notable ancients like Plato and Aristotle actually did partake in the mysterious Eleusinian ritual. Whether it had psychedelics or the altered state of consciousness was achieved through other means of fasting and chanting and mass psychosis isn't clear, but the great minds of old recognized the value in partaking in such a ritual that revealed mysteries about death, and is said by Cicero in De Legibus. For it appears to be among the many exceptional and divine things that happen to produce a complicated feeling like nothing is better than those mysteries. For by means of them we have been transformed from a rough and savage way of life to a state of humanity that is civilized. Just as they are called initiations, so natural fact we have learned from them the fundamentals of life and have grasped the basis not only for living with joy, but also for dying with a better hope. And they were meant to be accessible for the normal folk as well, in supervised use. Participation only cost what was 1 day of work in those days. Psychedelics have for thousands of years played an important role in humanity. We have lost the sacred traditions temporarily, but it seems we are finding them again. The literal witch hunt couldn't wipe them out. For otherwise untreatable disorders, but for the regular folk as well, seems the ancients thought the society to benefit from correctly executed mysteries. Tate. Some quotes from Ryan.
And of course, no one embodies toxic masculinity or just being a fucking douche more than Andrew Tate.
He takes advantage of women, treats women terribly, and then needs to impress a bunch of losers on the internet. He's someone who's got kicked in the head a lot of times, so probably not someone you want to take medical advice from. From these, could you guess what argument of Tate's is Ryan discussing? It comes from a Piers Morgan interview, where Piers argued, and I quote,
"But a clinically depressed person has an absolutely proven medical condition that is beyond their control."
Where Tate's point was,
I believe feeling depressed is real. I do not believe it's a disease that you catch from the sky and you cannot affect. I believe that no matter what happens, I believe you have control of your own mind and you can fight against it. I believe if you change your circumstances in your life, you may feel different.
Then clarifying that he thinks the number one power a person has against these things is trying to take control of your mind and affecting your own life. That it's not healthy to hand over all your power and believe depression is an outside disease that you can't affect. Ryan, of course, presents it as a contextless tweet.
Clinical depression isn't real. Andrew Tate.
And presents Tate as saying people who are really struggling are faking it or just need to suck it up. That Tate is just being awful by being insensitive to what others are going through. That he is judging and holding others to high standards instead of being understanding and empathizing. That Lincoln's friends didn't demean or belittle him, as if Tate's advice were to demean and belittle. Tate's only argument is there's no such thing as something wrong with your brain that is out of your control. And we can't even easily argue that by medical definition Tate is wrong. From an article by Laura Sanders, a PhD in molecular biology and Science news writer on neuroscience, the serotonin chemical imbalance theory became popular with SSRI discovery and then advertisements in the late 90s, and by easing the shame some people felt for not being able to snap out of it on their own. But a recent review of evidence, published in July in Molecular Psychiatry, finds no consistent data supporting the idea that low serotonin causes depression. Aspirin can ease a headache, but a headache isn't caused by low aspirin. Reducing depression to specific problems of biology in the brain didn't work. Christia says, if you were a doctor 10 years ago, the dream was that neuroscience would give us the markers. We would look at the markers and say, okay, you get this drug, you this kind of therapy, but it hasn't happened. Our friendships, our loves, our setbacks, and our stress can all influence our health. Depression is linked to the state of the world, and there's no denying it.
Is that a lot of people who are clinically depressed are suffering with something in their life, and if you fix the problem in their life, perhaps they won't feel depressed anymore. That's not a disease.
No, but Andrew,
that's situational.
Andrew, you're simply wrong.
Work like hell, put in 80 to 100 hours a week, Elon Musk.
It wasn't a tweet. It is a quote taken from an interview, meaning it has context. What was the question he was answering? What was the rest of his answer up to that point? Does Ryan mention any of it? Of course not. Instead, he said overworking bad and attacked Elon's character.
Pulling all-nighters, not taking care of yourself, neglecting yourself, ended poorly, as it clearly is doing for Elon Musk. He is deteriorating before our eyes. His reliance on Ambien, clearly his judgment is impaired.
The full context reveals that Elon was asked, "What is your advice to entrepreneurs?" He answered that he was not sure he has given enough thought to this question to be able to answer, but he will try. The answer was 3 steps. Become great at assessing what will be truly beneficial to others. Be tenacious, and then just work like hell. Put in 80 to 100-hour weeks. That'll improve your odds of success if competing against others who only put in the 40 hours. As a suggestion for entrepreneurs, and only after telling them to first be good at sifting which work is useful, it suddenly doesn't sound as ridiculous, no? Moreover, if you interpret the first part, what's worthy, as some version of living a good life, suddenly 80 hours of work is nothing. As Rian Doris explains, burnout isn't solely caused by too much work. It can stem from a lack of control, values conflict, insufficient reward, work overload, unfairness, or a breakdown of community. Only one of those is related to overworking. So if you make sure to pick the right things to do, telling people to do more of them becomes pretty solid advice.
Show me someone without an ego, and I'll show you a loser. Donald Trump.
Having a healthy ego or high opinion of yourself is real positive in life. You cut half of the tweet out. The half that grounds the bold opening, explaining that he means a healthy ego and how a high opinion of yourself can be a real positive in life. Why did he cut it out? To misrepresent? To make the political discourse at the time some more divisive? The video came out a little before the elections. Or maybe simply because without cutting it out, he wouldn't have had an argument, as his argument was,
If we can define ego as this destructive, toxic thing, this thing that gets between us and other people.
and he couldn't really do that with the quote in its full context. And if he can't argue the point, how will he sell his Ego is Enemy book?
In order to think, you have to risk being offensive. Jordan Peterson.
Finally, this was indeed a tweet, and the full tweet is shown. It was originally from an interview, but Peterson did take the quote and tweet it, so finally, fair game. What will Ryan then say to this?
Now, look, I would agree in the sense that sometimes ideas are unsettling. Sometimes the truth hurts.
So why is this on Ryan's list of the worst advice on the internet? Because what he wants to do is insult Peterson,
But you know what they're also not? They're not assholes.
even though he can't find a single statement to argue.
The Stoics were the perpetual thorn in the side of the powerful and the elite, but the ordinary people they were kind and respectful to.
Insinuating Peterson is the one punching down. Elsewhere saying Peterson hurts
Other people's feelings for the sake of it. Like that the cruelty is the point. That's what shows that they're clever, smart, more rational, better than other people.
Peterson talks back to governments, censure, the medical board holding his license, and, the thing Ryan is dissing him for, use the name of a Hollywood star. Where is that punching down? Hormozi.
Don't have a morning routine.
It makes you weak. That is not a tweet. That is not a quote. At best, it might be a paraphrase of a YouTube video description. Hormozi's stance in that video, over-reliance on routine makes you weak if missing a sauna one morning means you lose the whole day of work. In other videos, he is set to replace a 3-hour routine with just 3 hours of work. What is Ryan's argument? Hitting snooze a bunch of times is a bad start to the day. That getting momentum in the morning is important. That immediately jumping on the phone instead of getting to what's important is not the way to start a day. So, everyone agrees. Hormozi's positive is minimum routine, most important is getting to work ASAP. Ryan's positive example is a choreographer whose routine was drinking coffee, then jumping into a cab to the studio. The day was won at that point. Ryan's own routine, wake, some quality time with kids, get them to school, go to the office and have done some writing before 10 a.m. So, everyone is saying the same thing. The first 3 hours of the day aren't spent journaling and meditating and saunas. They are spent on the most important tasks, work or being at the studio or kids and writing. What sucks is Ryan muddied this up, creating a false disagreement between him and Hormozi, and never himself saying that the 3-hour routines are not what he does. Thus the viewer still thinks his 3-hour red light therapy routine is the way to start the day.
Follow your passion.
It will never lead you astray. Why did Ryan add this? Again, no specific person. Googling it shows that it has been said a couple of times, mostly as part of someone sharing their stories of having followed their dream. Couldn't find it in a context of someone giving advice. What was the point then? Fabricate an argument where you could flex your intelligence muscles so an inattentive viewer would remember, I think he made some good arguments about passion. So indeed, Ryan is right and Jordan Peterson is a bigot and I'll go buy Ryan's books. What good does that do? What value have you added anywhere? A shameful video. This is it for my first day of being a defense attorney. Ryan, do better. Everyone else, be a good gardener. Okay.